Well, today we arrive at the second to the last study of the book of Esther in this series entitled For Such a Time as This. Now, as the author begins to bring this book to a close, it becomes evident that his desire, that person who is the author of this book, their desire is for the book's readers, including you and I today, to grasp more from this narrative than simply a great story. In fact, we find ourselves reminded of the importance of recognizing God's providence and his workings and his greatness in and through every aspect of every moment of every day. And drawing this study ever closer to its end, the author finds it imperative that we all learn to recognize our own need to remember and observe, as this study is entitled. Join with me as we read the text passage found in Esther chapter 9, verses 20 through 28. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all of King Ahasuerus' provinces, both near and far. He ordered them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month Adar every year, because during those days the Jews got rid of their enemies. That was the month when their sorrow was turned into rejoicing and their mourning into a holiday. They were to be days of feasting, rejoicing, and of sending gifts to one another and the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the practice they had begun, as Mordecai had written them to do. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them. He cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews return on his own head, and that he should be hanged with his sons on the gallows. For this reason, these days are called Purim, from the word pur. Because of all the instructions in this letter, as well as what they had witnessed and what had happened to them, the Jews bound themselves, their descendants, and all who joined with them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year according to the written instructions and according to the time appointed. These days are remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim will not lose their significance in Jewish life, and their memory will not fade from their descendants. You know, we think back on our times past. Our lives tended to be more ordered at times by unique family traditions that we held dear. There were the family reunions that we attended annually, looked forward to, had a great time. These were times that were spent with family, and we were building deeper relationships and reminiscing about the past and all the experiences that had been shared by so many. But sadly, much of that has slipped from our lives in this new generation. Time just doesn't seem to be available anymore for those types of engagements that we once held so dear. And then COVID came along, and any tradition that may have still existed has pretty much been wiped away by the distancing guidelines and the fear of spreading the virus. Many of our younger generations today have no idea who their extended family members are. Some never see cousins, aunts, uncles, even grandparents in this hurried world of today. And with that comes a total loss of any spread of family history, family values, past actions of family members. What a loss this young generation is suffering because of this. And this is very similar to what we are being presented in this study today. As we open this section of Esther chapter 9, the author is speaking directly to his readers. in their very own time, many years after the events of this book had actually taken place. The author explains the purpose of remembering this event. The story of Esther and Mordecai, it would serve as a reminder to generations of Jewish people about why they celebrate the Feast of Purim and why they do it in the way that they do. Today's passage records the very first Purim celebration, which Mordecai established as an official tradition. It would be held on a specific day, and it would be done for a very specific purpose. It would be marked by specific traditions, including a time of feasting, a time of exchanging presents of food, and of giving to the poor. There was an underlying theme of joy that flowed out of this celebration. And Purim would be an annual time for the Israelites to remember God's provision, his divine provision for his people. Purim centered on remembrance. In verses 24 and 25, the author recounts the key events that led to the deliverance of God's people. What began as the people's spontaneous response to God's provision and protection would be carried down from generation to generation. And this was to continue as an all-important family story of God's provision. Listen to me, your life is a testimony to the goodness, or should I say the greatness of God and of his divine workings. Are you sharing these things with others? Are you honoring God by recognizing and remembering and observing the things that he has done in your life and the things he continues to do in your life? Let me challenge you to share your testimony, because your testimony may be just what someone else needs to hear today. Until next time.